He must have been absolutely awestruck by this structure, which is enormous relative to everything around it.
This structure is the Temple Mount. For investigators, nevertheless, through detective work and the study of ancient records, it is now possible to rebuild the Temple Mount as Jesus knew it and uncover the secrets of its construction. It was the brainchild of Herod the Great, king of Judea at the time of Jesus' birth. Herod's achievement, and so the world that Jesus lived in was one molded by his would-be killer. In around 15 BC, Herod had embarked on a plan to build a new temple complex, far more grand than what already stood there. He would triple the size of the existing structure to make it cover an area equivalent of 25 football fields. He would surround it with huge walls. But he faced two major engineering challenges. Firstly, in Jewish thinking, there was only one possible location for the temple. He would have to demolish the existing structure, and the priests didn't trust him. They didn't believe he'd finish the job. To prove his good intentions, every stone needed for the new building would be quarried before work began on the site. 1 million tons of stone from sites all around the city. It took 8 years. A still greater challenge was that the summit of the Temple Mount was a peak, not a plateau. More than that, it was simply too small for Herod's plans. Herod arrived at a simple but extraordinarily ambitious solution. He made the mountain bigger. The Temple Mount that Jesus knew was in fact the largest man-made structure on Earth. The floor of the plaza, which would hold up to 250,000 people, was effectively a roof. It covered a network of chambers.
If we look at the Temple Mount today, we see a flat, huge area, which is all leveled. But in matter of fact, it is all artificially built. There is a mountain hidden at the very center, and the mountain looked like that, and what was added is a hanging floor going all the way here, and the walls around here, the retaining walls, support it. How one hang a floor like that? By supporting it with a lot of arches, walls below.
In the southeastern corner of the Temple Mount, there are 4 levels of arches making vaulted rooms. Each arch is 20 feet wide and 20 feet high. The technique of arch building is well known. It was also light. If Herod had tried the alternative, to simply fill this space with earth or rubble, the weight on the retaining walls would have been far too great. They would have had to have been made even thicker, or they would have collapsed.
So we can say that a single layer of stone would be, let's say, 800 to 1,000 pieces.
On average, each of these stones weighed around 9,000 pounds, roughly the weight of a full-grown elephant. Some were much bigger. Archaeologists have located the largest of the blocks used in the Temple Mount's construction. It can be found in what are called the rabbinical tunnels. Now buried by 2,000 years of progress and change, in Jesus' time it was in plain view at street level. Dr. Jody Magnus is a world expert on the architecture of Jesus' Jerusalem.
This very large stone is part of what's called the master course. The idea was to stabilize the Temple Mount by incorporating a row of stones that are much bigger, taller, and heavier than all of the other stones.
Its size is hard to comprehend. It is 20 times larger than the largest stone used in the building of Egypt's pyramids.
It's over 40 feet long, 10 feet high, and weighs over 400 tons.
The complex as Jesus knew it was the world's biggest construction site. But we can now create what it looked like on completion, the largest structure on Earth. It stood for only 5 years before a brutal Roman army tore it down. Next, one of archaeology's greatest riddles, we reconstruct the most important building in Jesus' life and the Temple Mount's crowning glory, the Holy Temple itself. According to the Gospel of St. Mark, Jesus is said to have pointed to the structures on Jerusalem's Temple Mount and said, "Do you see these great buildings? There will not be one stone left upon another that will not be thrown down." 40 years later, these words were proved to be prophetic. The Roman army, suppressing a Jewish revolt, destroyed the temple. The result for modern investigators is one of the most tantalizing challenges of biblical archaeology: to recreate the Holy Temple as it stood in the middle of the Temple Mount. It has taken the work of generations of scientists and scholars to build a picture of what Jesus would have seen when he came here. On entering the Temple Mount, he would move upwards through a series of courts or open spaces. He would pass a sign written in Greek warning all foreigners, meaning non-Jews, that if they passed beyond a certain point, they would be put to death. Then he would be in the court of the women, the last place where women were allowed. This was the outer court of the temple proper, or sanctuary. At the top of 15 semicircular steps was the beautiful gate leading to the court of the Israelites, and opened only to ritually purified Jewish males.
Jesus would not be able to go beyond that point because within the temple itself, only the priesthood entered. And the Holy of Holies at the back of the temple, only the high priest entered, and only once on the Day of Atonement per year.
Piecing together the evidence from written sources, it's possible to establish what the exterior of this jealously guarded sanctuary looked like. Archaeologists have calculated the height of the temple sanctuary compared to the structure that stands there now, the Muslim Dome of the Rock.
The wonderful Islamic building there is exactly half the height of the temple at Herod's and Jesus' time.
So this cavernous structure was the height of a 15-story office block. Our investigators want to know how the temple's builders managed to erect such a building with only the very primitive tools and lifting devices available in Jesus' time. It seems possible, then, that the sanctuary's awe-inspiring facade was created using a very cunning technique.
So in my opinion, when our sources describe the temple as being made of marble or covered with marble, what they actually mean is that the building was made of a shining white stone, or perhaps stone covered with a polished stucco.
We can now show the temple as it would have looked when Jesus saw it. The focal point of the city, white and gold, with plumes of smoke rising from the sacrificial altars that stood in front of it. The building was a magnet for believers all over the Middle East. When Jesus came to Jerusalem for his last Passover, there may have been 250,000 other visitors there.